everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Louisa, and this is my channel on mental health and spirituality and everything that's related to those topics. Today is a special day for me because I'm connecting with the beautiful Melissa Butler. Melissa and I have been working for some time together on recovery and I guess evolving. And Melissa is a psychic intuitive. She has lived experience of mental illness, which is where we began our relationship in common, but we've since learned we've got lots of other things in common as well. Melissa is a Reiki master and a lifelong student of astrology. So plenty of interesting topics that we can dive into there. And I just want to welcome you today, Melissa.
Thank you, Louisa. Hi, everyone.
It's beautiful to have just connect on this channel with people who, I guess, activate my own passion and excitement for topics. Melissa and I had a chat a few weeks ago and thought that we had noticed a bit of a gap in the discussion and the discourse out there on spirituality and mental health. I know if you're traditionally going through the mental health system, very often spirituality seems to be bypassed. There's not a lot of talk about it in the system, and not a lot of understanding of how it actually contributes to both becoming unwell with a mental illness or recovering using spirituality. So we're just going to take a deep dive into that topic. And I guess before I start, I'll just check in with Melissa if that introduction was adequate, Melissa, or is there anything else you'd like to tell?
Perfect.
Tell everybody you're happy with that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I might actually add what my diagnosis is, if that's
yes,
okay.
please. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, depressive type, PTSD, and PMDD, which many of you may not know what that is, but that's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So it's like really awful PMS, like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's great for people to know. I don't, as you know, I don't use diagnosis a lot, but sometimes it's really helpful for people to just hear because it is like a shortcut understanding of what you've gone through, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that very much. And given that we're going to be chatting about spirituality today, I thought it might also be worth defining for anybody watching what we actually mean by that, because we could mean many, many different things. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your expression of spirituality, what you feel like that means for you.
Sure. So for me, I sort of am guided by my heart center and my higher self. I am not religious as such. I do work with the moon cycles, of course, because I love astrology, and work with the transits of the planets. And I've done a lot of research into quantum physics, and I believe that for me, God would be represented as the very essence of the Big Bang. So that beginning of our universe. I mean, there's plenty of others out there, etc. But I feel there's there's like a fractal sort of synchronicities, and we all have an essence of God within us, in our hearts, I feel, in our soul.
That's beautiful.
Oh, and of course, sorry, to show respect to Mother Earth as well. I love shamanism, going back to the roots of you know, the original roots of where humans started becoming spiritual. Actually, I'll tell you a little story. I did some research into where spirituality actually began from like caveman days. And
Yes.
so it's quite beautiful. It was when we started discovering as humans that there's death, and we started becoming curious as to what happens after death, and we started respecting the bodies and burying them in the ground, and having ceremonial sort of practices to respect and let go of the human who we were so connected to throughout our lives. And they would sit there. The way they discovered this, archaeologists found that we used to make clay jewelry, and they would change the amount of beads per person, or depending on the sex of the person, or whether it was a mother, and they would bury those beads that took, I think that like hours to make per bead.
Wow.
And it was to show respect, you know, that they'd taken the time to do that, and to put something precious with the deceased body. And that was the beginning of a spiritual sort of, you know, just
Yeah. Thank you for that story, because it reminds us how timeless and ancient this is, right? It's almost, you could say, like, that story reminded me of the difference between an animal. It looks as if they just walk away from their dead. Some animals might bury them, but it sort of speaks to that thing of what is it to be a human, right? That there's more to our existence than this third dimensional reality that we all exist in. And that recognition that there is more. And I love how you mentioned death, because I think on the mental health journey, there's many deaths. There's deaths of the self. In fact, it doesn't even have to be a mental health journey. It's anyone's life, right? Because we go through many deaths as we evolve. So I wonder if every time we kind of come to a crisis point in life where we break down, such as when you're having a mental illness, it evokes, just by its very nature, that question of what else is there? There must be more. The transcendental kind of musing.
Yeah. And that brings to mind for me, you know, the topic of suicidal ideation too. I mean, that in itself is a death and rebirth. I mean, to think that some people actually follow through and you know, I know for myself, when I've had suicidal ideation, just that feeling you feel at that time, there's just no hope. There's no forward thinking. It's just the awful, yucky feeling you're feeling right then, like it's just too much. But then the next day, if you push through it, you know, like in times like that, I may have to take a little bit of extra medication under my psychiatrist's recommendation, and you wake up the next day and think, thank God I didn't do that, you know, thank God I didn't harm myself, and you know, like, and that in itself is just a death and rebirth, a very deep one. But it proves that there's always hope, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. You know, we have our ups and downs, we have our good and bad days, we have our good and bad weeks, months sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
But reaching out to another human, and also into your own spirituality, and going within yourself, doing your shadow work. Yeah, there's hope, isn't there? Yeah.
I wonder if in that case you could extrapolate that those moments of extreme darkness that you're talking about, that it somehow the idea of death is comforting. It draws you as if you're going home.
Yes.
You know, this idea of like, because we were all born, so we all have this feeling of separation ultimately from source. The birth process itself is a kind of a separation. Like we sort of, it's like the movie Avatar. Suddenly you're poof, you're in this world, you know. Playing this character Louisa or whatever, and then, but deep down there's this intuition that there's more than that, because we came from somewhere and we're going somewhere. And so is that place home? You know, I believe it is. And perhaps when life gets so tough here in this realm, that's where that desire to take one's life comes, because it's a yearning to go home. It's a yearning for both the pain to end and a yearning to go home.
Like Ram Dass, he calls our bodies a spacesuit, and you know, we've got to take care of it, and we've got to live in it and move about, and it's all a bit awkward, and and
yeah.
and that sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. No, it's gone. What did you just say? Sorry.
Just about the idea of being, you know, like separated, feeling very alone, and then yearning to go home.
Home, that's it. So it also reminds me of the fact that a lot of spiritual people call Earth our school. So we've come down in spirit. We're pure home, pure love, in essence, and then we come into a body, and it's lesson time, and you know, the hard lessons are what we're here to go through and feel emotions. I think that's the big lesson on Earth, is to feel emotions. And gosh, isn't it hard being an empath, you know? But gosh,
Well, I don't know about you, but perhaps you can think about your answer to this question. But if I was to think about how my spirituality was kind of intersected or weaved into my mental health journey, I would say that it is almost inextricably linked. Like there's no way I can separate what I went through with my mental health and my spirituality. I think in a sense, my mental health condition exacerbated because I wasn't finding a way to be truly spiritually connected to my own practices, even though I had a lot going on. I was meditating. I was at the time that I had my major psychosis, I was actually part of I was training under a guru in India. So on the surface, I had a lot of spiritual stuff going on, but the connection wasn't truly there. You know, I think it's possible to practice spirituality in a very cerebral way, you know, to just read the texts and go through the motions. But what I was yearning for, and was yearning for my whole life, was deep, deep connection to what I would call God. But I now could say source or universe or the quantum field. I use all of those, and great spirit. I use all of those words interchangeably. And my earliest memory is of wanting that connection, of it being so important to me that I actually wanted to be a nun when I was a little girl. I'm devoting my life to this God thing. And I feel like I must have strayed so far away from it, from that satisfying the quenching of the thirst, of the spiritual thirst, that psychosis was the way, really, was the beginning of me returning back to wholeness. Yeah. What about you? How do you feel your spirituality and mental health journey were woven together?
For me, it was a little bit different in the sense that well, I wasn't brought up religious, but I was introduced to Christianity in primary school very casually. And so I started believing in God and Jesus, and I had a little Bible, and I believed that Jesus was magic, and I just had my own little
Nice.
thoughts on it, and but my dad was brought up Catholic, but he didn't practice Catholicism. But then I started sort of being interested in the occult, and was fascinated by psychics, and I was going to different clairvoyance and psychic fairs and shops, and as a teenager with friends, and so there was all these different concepts, and I was a little bit lost. And then there was the facts that we started taking acid trips and stuff, and sort of really started opening our consciousness
That too.
and expansion, and really wanted to just explore the mind and what is out there, and you know, connect with the earth. And we where I grew up, it's like a little, well, it's a very bush, in New South Wales, bush area. So we would go down the bush and explore, and down the river and swim and play with the phosphorus in the water and be amazed by that. But then I started getting quite depressed as a teenager, just sort of from memory, felt really unloved. Really, it was just this deep yearning for love and connection. I suppose, you know, not being young anymore, it was like, you know, you're doing a lot more on your own. You're going off to school on your own, to high school, and you're transitioning into an adult. And that's when I started doing more deep sort of exploration inside myself. And I read the real awakening was the Celestine prophecy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true for so many people at that
Yeah.
time. I think it was in the late 80s or 90s when that book was really popular.
Yeah. So I read the Celestine prophecy, and then started seeing auras on trees and having connections with animals that were really intimate. And I had my son at age 17, so I was pregnant at 16. Wasn't a great relationship with his father, and so the trauma from that relationship led me down sort of harder drugs, and that's when my psychosis happened. But I didn't know that I was in psychosis. It was like just gosh, I mean, I was just really open and picking up things from people that I was like, you know, I didn't feel right, but I was blaming it on the fact that I was doing drugs, like, you know, every couple of weeks or so. And yeah, that went on for a year, and I was doing yeah, like indulging in things like seances, and, you know, I didn't know anything about protection back then, protecting myself from anything dark. Yeah, so there was still that element of spirituality to it, where I was definitely just wanting to know the same sort of thing as you, I suppose. who is God? Is there a God? Who am I? I feel so lost. There has to be more to this world. There's a real awakening and opening. Yeah.
Yeah, and that also, I can't help but speak to people who are struggling with drug addiction or have had that in their past where it created problems for them, because you know, I think by and large the urge to take any kind of drug is very similar to the urge to know God, right? Or to know the self, because it's that opening up of what I now know is the chakras and our energy vortices, which allow us to tap into these unseen realms, expanding our consciousness. I mean, I loved marijuana. I remember that for that reason, because it was like, oh, wow, I can see and understand all the stuff.
Marijuana for me made me really highly psychic and paranoid.
Yeah.
But I kept doing it.
This is it, right? Because it does on one level feel amazing to be kind of out of the ordinary constraints of your personality, your ego. But then I believe if there's a lot of fear and trauma stuffed into your energy field, that's also going to be amplified, right? Yeah. So like you, I got very, very paranoid on marijuana, and I have to be very careful with that stuff, because I find a lot of people with mental health conditions, illnesses, issues, whatever they want to describe it as, are also highly sensitive people, right? Often very psychic, very empathic. So maybe folks that are less sensitive can take some of these drugs and they're just fine. But if you're already sensitive, if you already have a trauma history, it can open up consciousness in a way that feels really uncontrolled, really chaotic, really frightening.
Like Carl Jung says, I mean, schizophrenia and psychosis is just your loss of ego and your unconscious just coming through full volt, and like being in a dream state. You don't need those drugs anymore, because like oh my God, you know, what is going on? Something came to mind though. Before I read the Celestine Prophecy, I was actually I did take up a meditation practice and yoga. So that was where I was a little more disciplined, becoming serious about my spirituality, and I wasn't doing drugs at the time. And I took part in what was called Sahaja yoga meditation. It was the first time that I felt energy, and I was pregnant with my second son at the time. And I was like, is it okay to be doing this while I'm pregnant? And they said, your son will become enlightened when he's born. And it was amazing that the man, like, they would raise the kundalini up your back while you were meditating. And I remember thinking, I said to him, are you touching my back? Because I can feel that. And he said, no, I'm just raising your kundalini, like it's energy. And I was like, wow. And see, I think because I had started the process of awakening the chakras, the lower chakras, and then I unfortunately did the harder drugs, it just opened me way up. And I'm still to this day trying to integrate everything, because I've been told by healers and shamans that I'm just really open in my higher chakras, and it's really hard to control. I just pick up so much stuff all the time, and and that kind of can't help then my mind jumping to, well, what happens when somebody like yourself, or in my case as well, I was like 3 months in a unmedicated psychosis, which just got scarier and scarier, and less sleep, and The only way I could find in the Western society to shut down those chakras again was turning up at a hospital and getting antipsychotic medication. Which does a very, very good job of shutting it all down. Like that's what it's designed to do, right, Jill?
Like, I mean, I remember literally feeling as if I was in fragments floating all around me of myself. Myself had just sort of disintegrated and was floating everywhere. That's a metaphor. And then after 2 weeks on these antipsychotic drugs that I'd never taken in my life, but it was like all those pieces just went chunk and came back together again. And I remembered who I was and I felt sane. Yeah. Which is not to say that I'm saying that's a cure. I'm just saying that's one of the effects of the antipsychotic medication. It didn't cure me at all, but it did give me a way to just stay safe and contained at that very intense period of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for both, you know, sort of I think some people just need that. Well, here in like you said, in Western society, we don't have those guides like Eastern countries do. In the community, like the shamans. I mean, they are around, but they're very hard to come across, and it's not common knowledge when you're in psychosis.
No,
to a shaman.
To Google shaman and the local city.
Yeah.
I mean,
help me.
God, I wanted one though. I absolutely wanted one, and I feel I need to speak to the other side of what I just told with my story, and that is that, you know, as soon as I had my psychotic break, I knew it was a spiritual experience at the heart of it, and that it was a healing crisis as well. And I wanted that shaman, and that was why I was unmedicated for 3 months, because I was looking for someone to help me. And my husband was on board with that as well, trying different things, but nothing. We just didn't find anything at the time. Yeah.
My mum took me to a Reiki group, so I had some energy healing. And I think the same. I felt, I mean, it was just a real crisis situation in my situation, because I had my children to take care of. I was a single mum, and I was kind of, I know now looking back on it, I was self-medicating to try and deal with the trauma that I had gone through with the relationship, because I just had a dream of being a mum and having, you know, getting married and having a little house, and it all fell apart, and I was so young and didn't have that much support at the time either. And so I now I've forgotten what I was saying.
The Reiki healing. I was intrigued to find out what happened.
That's right. Yeah, so that's what I was getting to. The fact that I actually ended up homeless, and my boys had to go into respite care.
Wow.
And the respite care, the government agency said to me, you know, you've got 3 months to try and find a place for you and the boys to live. And I just wasn't in the mental capacity to do that. And so unfortunately, it was very traumatic, but they ended up having to go to foster care for 3 years. And I went home. Mum and Dad finally sort of scooped me up. They weren't in the position to take the boys on board. That's just the way it was. I find that hard to deal with, but that no one did sort of step in and help us out a bit more. But I felt comfort finally after a couple of years of the psychosis and the awful situation. I felt comfort knowing that I was home again with mum and dad, but it was just real. It was something concrete, you know what I mean? It was like, oh, like, I mean, to be honest, like I didn't even believe that mum and dad were alive at one stage in my psychosis. Like I felt so isolated and just absolutely delusional, sort of just trying to get through every day and take care of my sons and just yeah, just struggling. But I started connecting with the earth, like connecting with the plants, talking to the plants. I had a deck of Indigenous tarot cards that were given to me by a friend. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, I'm just going to go for a walk and knock on people's doors and say, would you like a reading? And just to, you know, like, but yeah, I was sitting at the dinner table one night with mum and dad and my siblings, and I started giggling. I thought I could hear everyone's thoughts, but it felt okay to me. It was like, oh, you know, like, it reminded me of when we used to sit at the dinner table when I was little, and I can't really remember what I was hearing, but I started giggling to myself, and mum got quite frustrated. She must have seen the difference in me at other times as well, and it was just like, this is it. She slammed down her cutlery and just went, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, oh. And she took me to the GP, and yeah, they said they diagnosed me with a drug-induced psychosis. So I went into an early intervention service and was medicated, and yeah, you know, like had to sort of see a psych nurse once a week, psychiatrist once every fortnight, attend groups, go to like little excursions with all the other psych patients. We'd get on a bus and go places and have lunch and have picnics and stuff like that. And so that was for I think I did that for about 18 months, and then I was just sort of like cut off, like shoved back out into the world. And you know, I was never actually diagnosed with anything at the time. It was like, you had a drug-induced psychosis, we give you medication to help you, and you've done your time at the early psychosis intervention service. So now you just, yeah. And I felt so lost. I had lost touch with my spirituality again, because everything that the psych nurses and the psychiatrists were not so much the psychiatrist, but the psych nurse was very, you know, if anything, sort of, gosh, I mean, like, yeah, oh,
yeah,
anything slightly, slightly sort of grounded or reality. I don't know, how would you describe that? It's not,
I would describe it as non-material, right? The non-material world, like anything that is physical, is treated with great skepticism in the mental health system by and large, right? We're talking, we're being stereotypical here, because obviously, and like you, I have met certain people within the mental health system who are very open and have, you know, I've had nurses recommend books to me to read, like the Jeshua Channel books, which one psych nurse told me one night, and she kind of whispered it like it was this, you know, naughty thing to be telling me about. And you know, bless her, I'm so glad she did, because those books are still a massive influence on me, very powerful material. That but the fact that she had to do that quietly, you know, and then when I was a peer worker in hospital, it was the same thing. I had to be quite careful. So there is this unspoken taboo almost about spirituality and the non-physical world in mental health. And you're right, especially if you've had a psychosis or schizophrenia, the sort of psychotic disorder diagnosis. The minute you start talking about God or fairies or talking to trees, you know, people kind of, you just sense it, can't you? This moment when they shut down and they step back, it's like, ooh, you know. And then maybe the conversation is just changed suddenly, or they might say something like, you know, have you been taking your meds lately?
Yes. yeah. Or I think we'll book you in to see the psychiatrist a bit sooner, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they do it with a smile, you know. But you know what's behind it is this, at its most harmless, it's a kind of a non-acceptance, but at its most harmful, it's invalidation, it's ridicule, it's judgment. And I guess that's also what I want to touch on today is, you know, where you had a clash in the system, if you can think of any experiences that you've had where your spirituality and the world view of those that were treating you clashed.
Not a little bit from psychiatrists, where you know, talking about anything extrasensory would be shut down. That's not real. I would be told, like, literally,
that's not real.
That's not real. It's not true. Don't listen to it. Don't listen to that thought. Like, you know, like put that thought away. Don't listen to that voice. And this went on for many, many years for me. I could not find any therapists, or it was so separate. It was like, I worked in I kind of rebelled and worked in a new age store over in Sydney before I moved to South Australia. And so that, and I was practicing meditation and being mentored at the time. But then we moved over here when I was pregnant with my third son. I had met my new partner at the time, and he grew up in South Australia, so we moved over here. And I was kind of lost in the system, and his family were quite religious, and I wasn't strong enough in my beliefs to say this is who I am, because of the psychiatry and the stigmatism and the Western clinical sort of treatments. So it wasn't as such a spiritual shunning that I got in this circumstance I'm going to mention, but it was still very traumatic. But it was very very stigmatized. When I came over here, I went to a maternity clinics like you do sort of when you're pregnant, and we went through public health. And so I mentioned to the nurse, you know, like, because I had to, because I was on medication, and I had to make sure that was okay to take while I was pregnant, which they weigh up and they go, well, we don't want you to get unwell, so we'd prefer you to stay on your medication and as safe for the baby. And but I didn't have a diagnosis. So as soon as I mentioned that I had a drug-induced psychosis, oh my God, the way that I got treated.
Wow.
I had to see, like, they put me through the psychiatry system. I got hospitalized in the psych ward while I was pregnant.
Wow.
but the worst of it, I mean, I was blasé to it all. I was like so overwhelmed and happy. I must mention too, my previous two sons had come back to me. We fought in court, and they could see that I was, I had reformed and rebuilt my life, and I was going to be a good mum. And so I thought everything was great, but then when I gave birth to my son, they sat a psych nurse outside the door. I didn't know why.
Wow.
And I hadn't once mentioned that I wanted to harm or had any bad feelings. I was just a really happy mum, pregnant with my third child, new relationship, all that trauma from the past had kind of resolved. My family was back together. I'd moved interstate. It was like a new journey. And here they were monitoring me. I didn't know why. And then when I went home with my baby, we lived at my in-laws' house for the first 6 weeks, and while we were trying to look for housing, and Child Protection came out and said we want to see Melissa with the newborn.
Wow.
My mum-in-law.
Can they even do that?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
My mum-in-law shut down the Child Protection, said, look, she's fine. I'm here with her. She's doing great with the baby. She's breastfeeding. Nothing's wrong, and this was all because of having a mental illness that was undiagnosed, going interstate, and so that's not, I know that's not spiritual.
No, but it speaks to the fear, I think, that people have around, especially psychotic disorders, right?
Yeah.
There is so much fear. And I think that it is relevant for our discussion because you used a powerful phrase there before. You called it spiritual shunning. So psychosis is often about chaos, about the unseen, right? People traditionally, if they've got a diagnosis of psychosis, it's because they're hearing things or seeing things or experiencing things or believing things that other people can't see. They're not in touch with so-called consensual reality. And that scares the bejesus out of normal folks, right? But why is that? And my challenge is that I think on a societal level, it's because we have demonized the unseen. We have demonized spirituality. This is at least in the West. We can talk a bit about other cultures in a second, but, there's no appreciation for it. It's like if you're hearing the voice of your ancestor, let's say your loved one dies and you hear their voice. I mean, that is such a common thing. And yet even that could be called psychosis from a psychiatrist, according to their own definitions. So why is hearing voices even, like, it's not necessarily psychosis, is it? But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to talk about the fear. And I can feel that your story really beautifully illustrates that, because you had this diagnosis and there's all this fear reaction around it from other people.
And to talk about spirituality, when you've got the layers of fear from coming at you from every angle, you're going to be hospitalized if you do this, you're going to be medicated, you've got to do this, and we're going to watch you with your child. Women have their children taken away from them because they've got mental illnesses. And the trauma that the mum and the baby or child, or what they go through, like the Indigenous in Australia, the stolen generation. I mean, the trauma a mum and child go through being separated.
Mm.
And I had already been through that with my first two sons. I was scared shitless, excuse me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I was so frightened that that was going to happen again. And I thought, but I did not know why. I'm like,
Mm.
why I'm taking my
Mm.
medication. I'm just, yeah, it's just, it is definitely just fear-based. And then, you know, like if one thing that I have noticed is if you're a Christian or a Catholic or Muslim or if you come from an Eastern country, Hindu or Jewish, or that's acceptable because it's a controlled
Yeah,
religion.
good point.
But to be spiritual, and that is like going back to what I was saying about humans back in caveman days, and you know, shamans and the indigenous that still live today and carry on their traditions. I mean, it's okay for them to be religious, but for them to well, more so for us, I think that it's more acceptable now. It's becoming more acceptable for Indigenous people to have their separate beliefs, but yeah, I mean, just to be a spiritual person,
Yeah, a free ranging spiritual person.
yeah,
Like you're not under any organized religion. You're
yeah,
not like a descendant of the shamans from this and that tribe.
yeah,
You're just
yeah,
I'm just Louisa. I'm free ranging. Like I've got
yeah, yeah,
eclectic beliefs. I've picked all sorts of things up. I've got
yeah,
innate wisdom, you
yes.
know, and I communicate with higher self and star family and all these things that sound absolutely nuts
To them.
to, well, yeah, to the stereotypical them. You
Yeah,
know, again,
yeah.
I'm so careful because I don't want to paint everyone in the mental health system with that brush.
Oh
It's
no.
just a tendency,
Yeah,
right? It's a tendency that
yeah.
we've noticed, and so much fear. Um, I wrote a very angry, well, it wasn't that angry, I suppose. It's angry the way Louisa gets angry. I'm not really an angry person, but it was a forthright letter. Let's just call it that. It was called Letter to My Psychiatrist, and I made a video about it where I actually read that letter out because I was challenging these diagnoses that I was being given while saying, I have a completely different understanding of what I'm going through. And it has nothing to do with your bipolar diagnosis that you're trying to give me. This was like the last diagnosis that anyone ever tried to give me after schizophrenia, BPD, DID, blah, blah, blahs, right? Bipolar came along. I'm like, no, 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 this is what's actually going on. So I talked
Go
about
girl.
accessing multidimensionality, and I talked about, you know, ascension, like the shift that's happening on our planet, the shift in consciousness that's going on, and the plasmic light that we're all being exposed to, and all these things that, again, they sound crazy, but yeah. And that letter was more for me than anyone else, to be honest, because I had to sort of put my foot down and really claim my truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which actually brings me to something I want to kind of, got about 10 more minutes. So I just want to make sure we do address this, which is, given everything that you and I have learned, right? We've been through some hard times. And thank you, by the way, so much for sharing bits and pieces of your story today, because it's, yeah, like it's been a tough ride for you. I can hear that. So given the wisdom that you've accrued because of those experiences, what do we tell people going through it right now? You know,
I think,
what lessons can we impart there?
yeah, I think be really strong within yourself and your beliefs. Try not to be too influenced by other people, and do your research into what you know, what fires you up, your passion, what ignites you, you know, what you want to, like, I mean, we've got the internet now, so It's, you can do your research. And I found eventually, with my psychiatrist, once I could put the facts there behind my spiritual beliefs and put them, give an element of science to it, he gradually, he was more like, gave me more free reign. And I have seen, I've found a fantastic lady who's a transpersonal art therapist and Reiki master, and she has helped me flourish and bring back my spirituality. And
Beautiful.
so I still take my medication. I don't know what the future holds there, but I now know that I've had my psychiatrist on board for 10 years now. So I've grown a lot. But really reach out for supports, as much supports as you can. Find people that are your tribe, that are your people, that really make you feel safe and heard and just loved, whether it be family or therapists or and like you said, there are it's interesting, there are a lot of psych nurses out there now. We just have to find them that are open-minded and do incorporate both aspects, the spiritual and the clinical. So
definitely. And one thing I'll add to that too is you worked out how to forge a really good collaborative relationship with your psychiatrist, right? By you presenting, I guess it sounds like you were translating your wisdom into his word, his language, which is fine to do and admirable. And I've done exactly the same thing. I've had to kind of teach the people that I've worked with about my worldview. Coming from a place of personal sovereignty, expertise, like really backing myself, right? But one thing I have seen other people do, make a bit of a mistake in trying to persuade someone who's never going to be persuaded. I think that can be very damaging. So my advice to people would be, shop around for the right people, like you say, people who make you feel, I love what you said, safe, heard, and loved. Look for those qualities, and don't invest years of your life in therapy with someone who you constantly have to fight with. Yes, challenging can be good, but I think we get enough challenges from our family and our neighbors and other people in our lives that we need to still get along with. That therapist, that person is so critical and has got such I find a really important influence on our belief systems, that we're always fighting to assert our belief systems with that person. I personally feel like it can do some damage. For me, when I'm in those relationships with therapists, it reminds me of being back at home when I was little, when I was fighting to be me in a family that didn't understand my worldview. So perhaps that's why I'm particularly passionate about that as being important.
And I mean, if you've got mental health issues and you're not being heard and you're not connecting with that therapist, I mean, that is just going to exacerbate.
Exactly.
You're going to go home and feel frustrated and sort of like, maybe I'm wrong, and doubt yourself. And you've got to. It takes a while, but once you find your people, it's life-changing.
Exactly. And I mean, my psychiatrist, I love that he doesn't probably agree with everything and hold that belief in everything I say and hold that belief himself, but he's so open-minded and open-hearted that it's not an issue. Like, he'll hold space for that, and that's all I need, from him anyway. And then there's lots of other other people. You said find your tribe. I totally agree. Link, you know, it doesn't have to be your therapist. Link in with people in your local community, or if it's online, if you're very isolated, you know, you can find these communities online now. People who believe what you believe, and or read books, listen to YouTube teachings. All of those things I found as I was fighting to claim my beliefs as true, as my truth, you know, that I needed a lot of validation from external sources like that to bolster me. Otherwise, it was just me against the world, you know.
I know, and I mean, that's the beauty of the internet now, like that you can find support groups on social media as well. And I mean, years ago, you know, so isolating when we didn't have that, you know. It was so I mean
all the Gen Z people listening are going, what are they talking about? Like pre-internet. You had to go to the library. Oh my God.
Or going to the news. I mean, I think I found the Sahaja yoga meditation in the newspaper. You know, like there was just, it was just in a someone's lounge room.
Oh, cute. That's cute. Still, we'll always find a way. All right. Well, look, that feels like a good place to end today's discussion. I don't want to keep it too long for people that are watching. We can just feel how that goes for us. Maybe we can connect again and continue this discussion, because I've really enjoyed it. It feels like diving into a topic that maybe I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Yeah.
It's felt good. I really hope it's helped some people, and you know, you're not alone. It's there's lots of other people going through similar things to us.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate your honesty and your beautiful presence, your beautiful energy. And until we connect again.
Okay. Bye.